Before leaving the house, Jack wrote a letter explaining his plans. His sister, Lily, has suffered from mental illness since their mother's death and tried to erase herself. But Jack saved her in time. Jack wanted her to be cared for at home under a family doctor, but she became a ward of the state and was sent to an asylum where visitors were not allowed. Desperate to help him, Jack decided to pretend to be crazy, so he was also sent to the asylum, leaving behind the letter as an insurance policy. He started by injuring himself, cutting his hair badly and breaking a mirror. He then went shirtless out in public and started bumping into people while swearing and talking nonsense about monsters. Soon police arrived and detained him while paramedics gave him a sedative. Moments later, Jack was taken to the asylum and a guard named Charles took him on a stretcher to see Dr. Janetti. Jack felt dizzy from the sedative but still tried to say a few more stupid things to continue his actions. Janetti immediately decides that Jack needs maximum security and Charles takes him to a special corridor where tons of dangerous people are kept. Charles ties Jack to the bed while explaining that one of his neighbors is the notorious Mark, who killed a group of girls and kept their bodies to do his dirty work. As he leaves, Charles notices Mark vomiting blood and enters the cell to help him. Mark reveals that he has a sword and Jack sees it, so he shouts a warning. Charles managed to defend himself just in time and closed the cell door before leaving. Mark then angrily scolds Jack for ruining his escape plan, causing the others in the cell to start screaming as well. Sometime later, Janetti visited Jack and decided that he was calm enough to be placed in a mental hospital. After Charles took Jack away, Janetti approached Mark and mentioned a treatment called Orpheum before gently touching his head to keep him in a passive state. In the psychiatric ward, a nurse named Nancy asks Jack to wait a second while she completes her paperwork. While she was in another room, Jack started looking at the other patients. He approached a woman thinking it was Lily, but it was actually a patient named Heather, who friendly and gave him a piece of paper. Suddenly, she started screaming, accusing Jack of wanting to take advantage of her. Nancy immediately returns and silences Heather by threatening to take her upstairs. Next, Nancy shows Jack around while explaining the rules. At that moment, she was attacked by Loomis, who began choking her and causing her to release her panic button. This is recovered by Dave, who passes it to Jack so he can press the button. Just then, Janetti arrives and with just a few words, he makes Nancy let go of Loomis. Charles then instructed Loomis to take him upstairs while Janetti announced the closing order. Nancy took Jack to her room and he pretended to be asleep. As soon as she left, he checked the window to see if he could escape through it. Suddenly, she heard a noise and opened the door to the closet to find Dave, who explains that he just wants to make sure Jack doesn't have crazy eyes. Jack realizes that Mark has white eyes and Dave confirms that it is due to the Orpheum treatment. On the ceiling, Jack can see a small glitch and Dave explains that the Orpheum is going on in the lab upstairs. People treated their return very differently. At the lab, Janetti electrocuted Loomis until his mouth foamed at the mouth. Assistant Vera shuts down and scolds Janetti for going too far. But Janetti says he knows what he's doing and asks him to prepare Loomis for another dose of Orpheum. When Vera refuses, Janetti panics and begins describing how Orpheum can help the patient's brain by injecting Loomis himself. It made his eyes turn white. The next day, Jack finally saw his sister in the garden, so he went to the common room to wait for her. When he approached her, Lily immediately scolded him for coming, saying that she did not want to be saved because she was as sick as their mother. An argument ensued and Lily screamed, so a nurse took her back to her room. All this was seen by Heather, who seemed very amused. Later in the cafeteria, Jack took a spoon and put it in his pocket when no one was looking. Suddenly, Heather approached him to ask him questions about Lily. She also invited Jack to her room at night, but he refused and ignored her cries. Jack sat down with Dave and soon they were joined by Charles, who reminded Dave of their agreement. Dave was supposed to have stolen his medicine, or Charles would have reported him. After Charles left, Dave asked Jack to keep it a secret, and in return he promised not to tell anyone that Jack wasn't really crazy, which he realized because Jack was acting sane while he was there, private. That night, Charles entered Heather's room and forced her to do dirty work with him. This happens often and Charles silences her by pointing out that no one will believe her. Meanwhile, Jack tries to use a spoon to collect coins on the bed. The next morning, he used these coins to try to open the window but failed and injured his finger. Later, during group therapy, Jack told the story of his mother's illness and how they operated on her brain multiple times. His hand continued to bleed, and soon Loomis fell to his knees and began shaking as he looked at the blood. The nurse told him to go back to his seat, but instead, Loomis jumped on top of Jack while another patient with white eyes was licking blood from the floor. Chaos erupts as the boys fight and the nurse removes her panic button. But before she can press it, Loomis bites her hand to stop her. Charles arrives and attacks Loomis to knock him out. Then the nurse takes everyone to their rooms as she announces another lockdown. Jack and Dave agree that Loomis wants Jack's blood, meaning Orpheum is more than just a cure. Jack then requests a meeting with Janetti and asks him to retrieve the letter from his apartment. They found the letter, but the paper was empty except for a few words. Jack panics and accuses Janetti of playing tricks on him while swearing he is not crazy. But Janetti simply orders Charles to take Jack to maximum security. Jack screamed and struggled, in every way but to no avail. The other patients scold him back and Mark reminds him that he wants revenge. Hours passed and Jack felt like he was really going crazy. When Janetti comes to see him, Jack starts pretending to be crazy again and apologizes for his previous outburst, so he is allowed to return to the psychiatric ward. In the afternoon, Jack asked Dave to teach him how to sneak like stealing medicine because he wanted to investigate the Orpheum, but Dave refused. That night, Jack walked out of his room and was surprised by Dave. He changed his mind and agreed to show Jack how to sneak, but he wouldn't go upstairs with Jack. The duo move carefully throughout the facility while avoiding Charles, and Dave shows Jack how to get into an office, where Dave steals drugs while Jack checks the office and steals a security pass. At that moment, Charles walked in, but the duo escaped in time. Charles looked around and quickly left. Then Jack used the security card to open the door and went upstairs. Charles was engrossed in the phone and did not look at the security cameras, so Jack could easily move around without being caught. Finally, he went to the quarantine room and checked the windows of each room, surprised by the strong reaction of the crazy people. A few doors later, he finds Lily, who apologizes for screaming at him last time and begs for help because she saw her neighbors affected by the experiments. Unfortunately, Jack hears Charles coming and has to run away. After passing through many corridors, including a maximum security corridor, Jack reaches Janetti's laboratory. He finds a cage and steps back in surprise when he sees Loomis inside trying to attack him. Jack continues looking around and finds a bottle of Orpheum, which he steals with a scalpel. Then he had to hide because he heard voices. Janetti arrives, followed by Vera, who points out that Orpheum is multiplying in the patient's body. Janetti gets angry and pushes her against the shelf, tying her up while explaining that Orpheum is more than just a medicine. He said it was actually nanotechnology and it worked the way he programmed it. Vera points out that the Orpheum is mutating and possibly contagious, but Janetti ignores her while injecting himself. He then uses a scalpel to cut off his leg, and the pain is so pleasurable that he begins to do the dirty work by force while Loomis watches. When he's done, he orders Vera to find the mutator to control it. Vera then wets her finger with her blood and teases Loomis with it. The next day, Heather teases Jack because he doesn't look like he's slept. He ignored her and approached Dave to show him the bottle of Orpheum. When the nurse came to remove the label for him, he promptly hid the bottle in his hand. Jack then takes Dave outside and asks him to steal Charles's key so he can save Lily. They are interrupted by a patient with white eyes who has found a cat. He displays the animal before suddenly beheading the poor creature to eat it. The duo panicked and tried to run away, but the guy grabbed Dave. Jack immediately pushed the man away to save Dave and was attacked instead. While the two men fought on the ground, the other patients took the cat's body and fed it. Luckily, Charles arrived and chased the guy until he passed out. That night, Jack has nightmares with terrifying images such as crazy people turning violent, his mother's death, Lily's self-destruction attempt, and strange mutated bodies. In the morning, Jack rushed into the common room and kicked the table as he demanded to see Lily. The nurse told him that she was upstairs with Janetti, making him very angry. Jack yelled at him and noticed his white eyes, but the nurse swore it was normal because it was just a side effect of Loomis's bite. She intended to take him upstairs, but Nancy took him back to her room and locked the door. Meanwhile, Vera brings food to the patient. Maximum security push it through a special hatch. Mark threw his plate on the floor and said he preferred raw food. That night, someone came into Jack's room and he jumped on him. But it was only Dave who stole Charles's key by putting sleeping pills in his drink. So, as the duo go upstairs, Lily is tied up in the laboratory and begs for mercy while Vera tries to feed Loomis. He was sleeping, so she tried to poke him with a stick and accidentally dropped it. When Vera tried to bring him back, Loomis suddenly grabbed her arm and broke it to suck the blood. As Lily screams for help, Vera backs away and loses limbs, so she ties her belt around a tree to stop the bleeding. At that moment, Janetti entered the laboratory and was angry with Vera for putting the entire program in danger. Vera denounced his attitude, but he only said that she did not care as long as she was not the victim. He tied her to a bed in another room to treat her and took a sample from her arm and confirmed that the infection was spreading, which made him happy. He then went to find Charles and fails to find him. However, he sees Jack and Dave on the security camera. He tries to contact Charles, but he is sleeping in Heather's room and she is hiding the radio. Jack and Dave continue to sneak through the maximum security hallway. Mark offered to cooperate with them, but Jack refused. As soon as the nurse came to check on Vera, Janetti became angry and cut off the power, causing the door to the maximum security area to open. All the dangerous patients come out and Jack fights them while Dave fights the door until he gets it open. The duo entered another room and used Charles's taser to short-circuit the lock, delivering a shock that knocked the patient back. They then begin to run away, only to be chased by dangerous patients. They finally reached the lab and it took Jack a few minutes to open the lock. The patients were about to arrest them, but the duo opened the lab just in time and entered, pushing the locked door shut and crushing a patient's finger in the process. Jack then ran to untie Lily, who confirmed that Janetti had not yet injected her. Meanwhile, the nurse treats Vera's wound, but at that moment she finally loses her wound and starts eating it. Back at Jack's group, they leave the lab and now have to get through maximum security to get to the stairs. In the cell, there was a lot of blood and bodies of patients killed by white-eyed men. They open the door at the end of the hallway and find it blocked, meaning it's a trap. Infected patients come out of the ceiling, so Jack tries to activate the elevator with the rope from the lock while Lily and Dave fend off the patients with tasers. They start taking down enemies, and if someone bleeds, the other patients will eat their comrades. Suddenly, Mark joined Lily and started dragging her, but luckily Dave attacked Mark and saved her in time. When Jack finally finished riding the elevator, he joined the fight and was nearly killed by his enemies, but Lily managed to defeat him by electrocuting him in the mouth. The trio rushes into the elevator and Mark gives chase, holding the door open. However, Jack stabs him in the chin with a scalpel, causing the elevator to close. Within minutes, the group arrives at the mental hospital and Jack breaks the elevator control panel so he can't follow them. They were shocked to see blood everywhere, so Jack asked Dave to protect Lily while he investigated. He followed a strange noise and opened the bedroom door to find Heather eating the dead Charles. She immediately sees him and begins to follow him, so Jack walks away and fends off the other patients before punching Heather and running away. As the other patients followed him, Jack returned to Lily and Dave and they blocked the door before leaving. At the reception, Nancy sees them and throws a chair through the window in panic, but she calms down when she realizes the trio are not infected. Also eager to escape, she led the group into the kitchen to find another way out and grabbed a knife to defend herself. Suddenly a patient jumped at Jack, but the guy was easily overpowered and they killed him with a knife in the face. Soon, other patients arrived and a fierce fight ensued as blood splattered all over the kitchen from all the stabbings. A group of patients died as the heroes made their way through the kitchen and eventually reached the back door, which they made sure to lock before going up the emergency stairs. They eventually find an office and try to find a phone, but instead find the infected nurse. She explains that Janetti is looking for a solution, so everyone should wait. The nurse also scolds Nancy for abandoning her post, but Nancy silences her by stabbing her. Nancy then remembers Janetti has a gun, so the group rushes to his office. Dave picks up a sword from the wall, and Jack opens a desk drawer to find the weapon along with his real letter. Go out, they notice a trail of blood on the ground and follow it. Just then, the nurse bursts through the door and attacks Nancy, but Lily stabs her to death. They then run into the recovery room and find Vera, who tells them about a hidden passageway in the lab and how to use the laundry chute to avoid the stairs. Before leaving, Vera asks for euthanasia so she won't become a cannibal. Nancy gives her an injection and Vera dies. The group began running back to avoid the other incoming patients while looking for the laundry chute. Nancy opens the door and finds an infected maid, who jumps on her and bites her neck. Jack rushed to knock the woman down and check on Nancy, who was unfortunately dead. Meanwhile, Dave and Lily find the laundry chute, so they start climbing over it while Jack continues to shoot the incoming patients. Heather also arrives and Jack tries to shoot her, but realizes he is out of bullets. Instead, he kicked her before parachuting, forcing Heather to follow him. After resisting her hands, Jack stabbed her and knocked her down. The trio continued climbing the mountain and entered the maximum security area, where infected patients had been eating each other. Suddenly, Mark blocked their path and attacked Jack with the scalpel from before. The men can barely resist before Lily kicks Mark and stabs him head first, killing him. The trio eventually reach the lab and discover Loomis still in his cage. As Jack and Lily explore the secret tunnel, Janetti appears and grabs Dave, slowly stabbing an ice pick into his eye to perform an improvised lobotomy. It does not kill him but destroys his brain. Janetti then hits Jack with a lamp and tries to attack him with an ice pick, so the two brothers fight to subdue the doctor. Jack grabs the ice pick when his leg is stabbed and pushes Janetti, stabbing him back before Lily beats him until he is unconscious. When Janetti woke up, he was tied to a cage so Loomis could feed him. The two brothers fled through the secret tunnel when they heard Janetti scream. The tunnel takes them to the roof, and as the brothers go downstairs, Jack accidentally drops the bottle of Orpheum, and it shatters. In the morning, they finally got out and wandered the streets until they were found by the police. After hearing their story, the police arrived at the asylum and Janetti opened the door without any problems. Suddenly, a group of infected patients appear and kill the police officer on the roof of the car while the two brothers watch helplessly. Ultimately, the patients escape into the wilderness to spread the infection. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel.